Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now this video is a sort of part 2 to one I made back in March of this year, 2016, which looked at the downloading plugins and specifically the Google Nix Collection, which had just become free to download, and it is still free to download. So you can find and check out that video. If you haven't installed it and you've never used plugins before, I would suggest you look at that video and see how it is done. But this video, I'm assuming that you already have the Nix collection added into your PhotoPlus, and it will be found by going to the effects menu, down to plugins, and then to the Nix collection. Now, when I did the previous video, I did a quick look at some of the different filters, but this one I'm only going to be looking at the Colour Efex Pro 4 filter. Now, this is an adaptation of a digital photo magazine tutorial, and where possible I'm going to follow their settings that they used, and I've done this previously, and I changed this picture you can see on screen here, and I changed it to look like that by using the Colour Efex Pro 4 filter, but not just using one filter. I mean, in that previous video which I mentioned earlier, I only really looked at just using one filter at a time, but this uses numerous filters to end up with that effect from the start image, which was that one. I mean, you may not like the end result, but this is just an example of what can be done by sort of stacking filters one on top of the other. So let me go back to this original image. Now, where possible, I'm going to try and remember the settings. I have quickly jotted down some of the settings, and hopefully I will get it as close as possible. It may not end up looking exactly like the one I've just showed you before, but hopefully it will be near enough. So what we need to do is open the Colour Efex Pro 4 filter, and then the window for that effect will open up. Oh, before I carry on, let me just drop this down a second. Oh no, I can't do it now. Oh, let me close it then. One thing I will mention is that in the video that Digital Photo did, they used Photoshop Elements, I think it was, and the chap that did it did explain that normally when you do editing, you would duplicate your background image, so you've always got a sort of clean example of what it looked like at the start. But the plugin automatically knew that, so when it made the alterations and when it came back to elements, it automatically copied the background layer and then did its alterations on the copy. That works fine in Elements because I have tested that, but it doesn't work that way in PhotoPlus. It will make alterations to the background image and not make a copy of it. So you do need to be careful, especially when it comes to saving at the end of the process, that you save under a new name so you do not lose your original background copy. So that is one word of warning, that this is how this doesn't quite work the same way in PhotoPlus as it does in Elements and Photoshop. So let's go back to the plugin and open it up. Alright, as I've mentioned before in the past, in the first video, you can click on any of these and make individual changes just using one filter. Now, you can stack the filters, and to do that, you have this add filter button here. I'm not going to press it just yet, but say for example I'd use this one that I've got selected at the moment. If I click add filter, I could then add another one and it will stack them on top of each other. So this is quite an effective way of altering your image quite dramatically. Now, obviously unless you know what you're doing, which I really don't, which is why I'm sort of trying to follow the video I saw online on the disc from Digital Photo. It would be a case of hit and miss and try one filter, and if it worked, use it, and if it doesn't work, maybe move on to a different one. So this is the image here in the center, and the first filter that I'm going to use is Brilliance Warmth. Now, on the right hand side here we have the different settings that you can use to alter this, and I'm going to move the saturation up to roughly about 15% and the warmth up to about 80%. I think in the video that I watched he moved it up to 100%, but if I move it up to 100, I felt that was a bit excessive for my particular image, so I dropped mine back down to 80, or that's 78, but it's near enough. And the perpetual saturation, and moved it up to about 24-25%. There we go. Now at the top here we have a button that says compare. If you click and hold that, it will show you what the image looked like originally and what it looks like now with the changes that I have made. Right, so this is the point where we want to add another filter. So I'm going to click add filter. It will collapse the Brilliance Warmth filter. It is still there, but it is just collapsed. And then it's got empty filter. Please select a filter from the filter list. And this one I'm going to go with Classical Soft Focus. As you obviously you've probably noticed by now, these are all in alphabetical order, so whichever one I mention you can find it pretty easy by just following the alphabet. So this soft focus filter has been added, and up here you have a little drop down menu where you can have like soft focus. You can, as you run the cursor over the different methods, it will show you what the effect will be. Now I'm going to use method 3 with strength, and the diffuse detail I'm going to just bump up slightly to about 4 or 5%. Strength I'm going to drop down to around 29-30%, and the brightness I'm just going to brighten it up slightly by 2-3%. So again, you can go back to compare, and there's the original, and that's what it looks like now. So now we move on to the next filter I want to add. So I'll again click add filter, and this time we're going for detail extractor, and this is sort of brings out the details in the image, sort of making it almost like a bit HDR type effect. And I'm going to move the detail extractor slider up to about 40 or so percent, 41, that will do. Contrast I'm going to go up to around the 32, 33, something like that. And saturation, again I'm going to move the up to about 15, 16 or so percent. Now this really does sort of bring out the details. And again, we can compare what it would look like originally, and now we have a lot more detail. But what I want to do with this one is, I don't necessarily want this affecting the whole image. I just want it to affect certain areas. Now, in the buttons down here, this is on most of the filters, you have control points. You have the plus one, which will set the opacity at 100%, and the minus one, which will set the opacity at 0. So you can have the effect in a certain area, or you can remove the effect from a certain area. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the plus sign, and as you bring the cursor over, it changes to a sort of bullet target type thing. And I'm just going to bring it over here to the sky here on the left, and just click. And as you can see, it has this sort of weird icon here. If you click on this one here, you can move the slider to the right, so you can alter the range that this has effect on the image. And the bottom one alters the opacity of that effect. And you can move that around once you've set it to wherever you want. Let me just lower the size of this slightly. So you know, you can move it around to wherever you want. So I'm not necessarily want so much detail over here, but I've got a bit more detail on this side. Right, so now we're going to move on to the next filter. So again, I will click add filter, and the next one would be foliage. Now foliage, obviously it affects more the greens in your image. So obviously I've got this grass here and not much green anywhere else. But when I tried this, it didn't have so much effect on my image. It did have quite effect on the image that the person was using in the video that I'm sort of following. But you may want to use this one or not, depending on how much foliage you have. Again, you have a drop down menu here with different intensities of effect on the greens in the image. Now I don't know whether you can see these subtle changes as I go over these. I'm going to use the middle one because it's affecting this area here mainly. If I go on 2, it's much brighter than it is on 3. So I'll select 2, and then I will just bump up the effect to about 75% or so. Out there will do. So I now have a sort of much brighter green area down here than I did before. Again, we can go back to compare. That was the original. Right, we're now going to add yet another filter, and this one is Glamour Glow, which I need to scroll down slightly for this one. There we go, Glamour Glow. Now with this one, I'm going to leave the glow where it is on 27%. I'm going to drop the saturation right down to 0, and the glow warmth I'm going to bring right down to 0, which is, as you can see, this has sort of taken all the colour out of the image pretty much. But this is where I'm going to add another control point. So I'll click on the plus sign here, and I'm just going to put it roughly just slightly to the left of the bright sun area up here, and you can see it's brought the colour. It's not affecting that area now anymore, it's just really affecting this area up here, and it's sort of knocked back some of the colour that was up there and maybe not as bright. So I'm now going to move on to another filter, so I will click add filter, and this time it's graduated filters. Now this is like as if you'd drawn a graduated filter using PhotoPlus down the image, and again we've got color sets, we've got a drop down menu, and you can have it as blues or olive type colors, coffee colors, and then orange colors. They all got different effects. Now I'm going to go with the coffee number 3, and I'm going to knock back the effect of this filter down to around the 50 or so % mark. There we go, 50. And blend, I'm going to go down just slightly down to the 20s, 22, 23, something like that. I'm not altering any of these, but what I will do is alter whether it affects the shadows or the highlights, and I'm going to affect the highlights in this particular case, and I'm going to bump this up to around the 50% mark. Again, I'm going to have a quick look at the compare from where it started to where we are now. So I hope you can see that I'm sort of really altering the image quite considerably by how many we've got so far. We've got 2, 4, 6 filters so far, and we now need to, I'm going to move on to the next filter. So I'm again click add filter, and this time going down to Pro Contrast. Now I'm just going to change the dynamic contrast, and I'm going to bump that right up to 100%, which again has brought out a lot of the detail and the colour. But again, I just want to affect a certain area. So again, click on the plus sign for the control point, and I'm going to put it roughly in this dark cloud under the sunshine here, and maybe I'll reduce the size of the effect of the area that it's affecting. No, that's that one there, sorry. Yeah, down that bit, I think. So it's all a case of trial and error. I think I'll just come out, actually, I think I prefer it a bit bigger actually, so it affects more that area there, making that cloud a bit darker. I think this is slightly different to how I did it the first time, so these pictures will definitely end up different. Right, so I'm now going to add another filter. This time we're going for sunlight. So again, as you can see, it's now made it all much brighter again. But I'm going to make the light strength, I'm going to leave light strength on 20%. I'm not going to alter the temperature. The brightness I'm just going to leave where it is. Contrast, again, leave where it is. And saturation, I'm going to drop some of the saturation down. Oh, it's already on -10, so I'll leave that there. Maybe it's remembered it from where I was before. But this time I'm going to add this control point, and I'm going to put it sort of roughly about here between the sun and the clouds, so it's only sort of affecting that area around there, making that glow on the sea and what have you a bit brighter than it was before. So again, new filter, so it's add filter, and this one we're going for tonal contrast. As you can see, this has gone quite dramatically dark and what have you in certain areas. So we're just going to knock that back slightly We're going to leave that on 20%. Midtones I'm going to push up to, no, I'm going down minus 100%. Right down the other end. And the shadows I'm going to go minus, again, almost down to 100, but about 90% or so. And the saturation I'm going to bump up to 100%. And then I'm going to add another control point. And this time I'm going to go right into the brightest part of the sun. So that's going to make that nice bright orangey colour without really affecting the area outside of the control point. Right, add another filter. This time I'm going to go back up the alphabet because it's up the other end, and we're going to darken, lighten, center. Which sort of almost just makes it a vignette effect. Now, there's different shapes that you can have, but I'm going to leave that on 1, and I'm going to just drop down the luminosity down to 0 in the center there, and the border luminosity I'm currently on minus 50, but I'm going to bring this up to the plus 30 or so, round about there, 31 that will do. And the size of the center, I'm just going to nudge it up slightly. Now, one more filter to add, so I'll add filter, and then you've got cross processing. Not 100% certain what cross processing is, but as you can see, it sort of brought back some of the details that we added earlier, which may have got slightly lost with a couple of these other later filters. Now, it's again, I don't know what all these different things actually mean, because I mean LO3 or CO4, BO4 means not a lot to me, I'm afraid. But if you find one that you like, but I will leave it on BO2, which was where it was, and I will just knock back the strength of the effect down to about the 10 or so mark, 10%, and that is basically where I'm going to stop now. I mean, if you really want to go mad, you could add more and more filters, and if you don't like a particular one, you could turn one off and see what difference it makes without those particular filters. But I'm going to turn them all back on again. And if you want to look at the settings of a previous filter layer, you've got a little arrow next to this tick. If you click that, it will open that particular filter settings, and it will drop or collapse the one that you were previously on. So you could probably still tinker with the settings if you don't like the end result, but I'm going to leave this where it is, and then click OK. And then this is where the plugin will do its thing. So there's a little bit of time while it actually physically adds this to the actual image, whereas before it's just sort of showing you what it would look like on a representation of your image. It's almost there. And then what you want to look at is like this area here. That will now change, but like I said, it will affect the background layer. That doesn't make a new layer like it is in Elements and Photoshop. You can't do a sort of quick compare of what it looked like and what it ended up like. So let's see how close it is to the first one I did. Yeah, I didn't get it exactly the same. This new version of this area up here is much yellower and brighter than the first attempt I did. In fact, I think I prefer this one here. I obviously didn't overcook the brightening or the colouring of this particular area up here. But both versions work okay. So that's just a quick look at how you can stack the different filters in that particular plugin. So I hope you've enjoyed that and learnt something like I did. Thanks once again for Digital Photo for teaching me something new, and so I can pass it on and hopefully teach users of PhotoPlus how to get the most out of their programs and their plugins. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.